What is one situation in which you've felt completely helpless? Being robbed at gunpoint at work. Guy approached me outside as I was walking to my vehicle to go home. Held a gun to my head and then said if I wanted to make it home that I'd do what he asked. Had me turn around and walk back inside, then had me take him to our petty cash, then tied me up. Took me about 30 minutes before I felt like I could get up. I thought he was still in the building. Then another 10 minutes to get myself loose. Definitely not a roller coaster I want to ride again. One of my worst nightmares. I'd seriously probably have a heart attack and die on the spot. My parent was an alcoholic when I was a kid. I was the only one who seemed to know. I didn't have any other family I felt like I could tell. So I told my teacher at school. Cue my parent twisting things, calling me a liar, mentally ill, accused me of ruining their lives, etc. This went on for over a year. They made my life a living heck for telling someone. I felt like there was nothing that I could do but take it. That will never, ever be your fault, and you did the very best thing you could have done in that situation. Unfortunately, somebody dropped the ball. Really, freaking hard. Children should never be left with addicts of any kind. They may not always be physically abusive, but they'll literally never be able to properly care for anyone else while under the influence. I was young and stupid on my first big vacation on my own in Turkey. I put my one and only debit card into a freestanding ATM that was on a corner in a quiet part of the town I was visiting, and nothing happened after it went into the machine. It just made a whirring sound and nothing changed on the display or anything. I felt waves of helplessness crash over me as I realized I now was in a strange faraway country literally without money. What the heck do I even do? Call my embassy or something? It's all going to be a huge nightmare. I sat down on the curb by the ATM thinking about what to do, and literally like 10 minutes later my debit card was whirred out of the ATM again. Now I travel with several credit cards and only use my debit one at home. I also never use freestanding ATMs. I try to find ones that are inside bank branches. The first time I had a patient die, there was nothing more we could do for him, so I just sat at his bedside till his daughter could come to the hospital. I'm a paramedic. When the patient is dead already, it's easy. When they are actively dying in front of you and you don't have a magic fix, that's when it feels impossible. My mom has Alzheimer's and is slowly losing her mind. She knows something is wrong and gets scared and frustrated and angry and abusive sometimes, but doesn't realize that she's not capable of making decisions and doing all the things she used to. I'm trying to have her driver's license revoked, enact my power of attorney, take over all her affairs, and probably put her in a home. Every step I take involves so many appointments with useless doctors, etc., and it's nearly impossible to get her to appointments. She has money to pay for care, but I can't access it, and she pee it all away on scams that target the elderly and forgetful. I took so many days off to bring her to medical appointments or deal with emergencies that I was fired from my last 2 jobs. The rest of my family criticizes and complains that I'm not doing a good enough job or moving swiftly enough, but nobody helps me, and I live in a state of complete chaos where it's difficult to even make breakfast or take out the trash. If anyone knows a good therapist in Toronto. I was in the hospital the morning after having surgery to remove nodules from my thyroid. I was 19 at the time. Before the surgery, I'd had multiple biopsies and everything always came back benign. But they kept getting bigger and it was making my life uncomfortable, so I wanted them gone. I was with my mom, eating some breakfast and thinking that I'd be out of the hospital in a couple of hours. A nurse comes in and tells me to stop eating and drinking, as I'll be going into surgery. My mom and I kind of look at her confused and say, what? She said that it was doctor's orders and she just walks off. At that point, my mom and I kind of figured that this must mean that when they tested the nodules after the surgery, they must not have been benign after all. My doctor came in and confirmed that this was true. They were cancerous, and to be on the safe side, they were going to remove my thyroid. I started crying and feeling really scared, but not because of the cancer. I had mentally and emotionally prepared myself to go into surgery before, but the fact that I was going into it again just threw me for a loop. I felt very scared and I'll never forget crying and shaking as they moved me from the stretcher onto the operating table. I didn't stop crying until they put me under. Going in for surgery is definitely not the worst thing in the world, but the surprise of having to do it again when I hadn't expected it made me feel helpless. Thankfully, that experience taught me to be brave, and I kind of use it as a frame of reference. If I get scared, I think back to that experience and say to myself, you can handle it, you've got this. One of my friends was very suicidal. Everything in her life was going badly. Family, breakup, university stress and so on. She was admitted into the hospital, but the hospital wouldn't release her unless they knew she wasn't going to be alone. I took time off work and spent a whole week with her. I really thought I was helping, if even a little, but one night when we were in bed ready to go to sleep, she told me everything she was feeling. I was speechless. I was scared. At one point I was even convinced the ending her life was the right answer. I realized that I had no idea what to do. I made sure she was eating. I tried to keep her distracted with random news or stories, etc. But after that night I felt helpless to help my friend. I felt like nothing I did actually helped, and the week ended in a somber note, but I didn't leave her side until I knew she had someone else there with her. We talked later, when she was feeling better, and she told me how much my being there helped, and she apologized. Even though I felt like I did nothing, just being there helped, even if slightly. Moral here: don't give up on your friends, even if you feel helpless. After going through depression myself last year around this time actually, I can tell you just the act of being with someone helps a lot. You did very good. My brother running at me with a knife trying to commit homicide. I had a scar, and my aunt somehow calmed him and took the knife away. I had to climb some stairs and open doors. He's better now, and neither suicidal nor homicidal. Right now, a family member died last week from a genetic disease, and the funeral is tomorrow. He had just turned 3. My heart is breaking for his parents, and words seem so shallow. I wish I could make it stop hurting for them. I'm so sorry. I have a rare genetic disease myself, SCAD, and one of the symptoms is sudden death. If I had been diagnosed before having kids it'd be easier, but I always worry something will happen to me and I'll leave 4 kids behind. My oldest already lost her dad. Frick genetics. Watching my 9-year-old niece slowly die from a rare, aggressive cancer despite trying everything I could come up with to save her. Total helplessness. Crap, my condolences. I hope you're doing okay. I had a house search. Standing there in the morning at 6:30, right out of bed watching 3 officers searching for things. Impounding my computers and CDs was the worst thing I have ever experienced because I did not know what to do. Who could help me or what could happen to me? Hearing my mom have an epileptic seizure on the phone while she was home alone. We had barely spoken for 30 seconds, and I had no clue where in the house she could have been or about her surroundings. I called all of my siblings. Everyone was busy. In addition, because I live in a different region, the emergency number was having problems forwarding my call to my family's region. It was absolutely terrifying. By the time one of my siblings finally called back, I was a sobbing mess. I was trapped in an elevator at work for about an hour. The employees tried to ram their bodies into the doors to unjam it, but to no avail. I had just taken the trash out to the dumpsters too and was stinking like rotten fish. So I just sat there and contemplated if there's anything I could do. After about 0.2 seconds I decided to just sit in the corner and burn my phone battery. Being trapped in some random gas station bathroom because the key they used to lock it just broke when trying to open it. No employee cared. Frick. He didn't look like a junkie, but I'm not cleaning that up. My shift's over in 3 hours and then it's someone else's problem. Involved in a 50+ car pileup in midwinter. My car stopped nicely, but nowhere to go, and in the rearview mirror I watch as a pickup truck barrels closer and closer to me. I was oddly calm, even upon impact. No injuries. Car was totaled. It was awesome. One situation I've been in my fair share of times, a panic attack, completely helpless, barely, if at all, in control of your own mind, limbs shaking, deep staggered breaths, and then eventually the crash afterwards where your body feels dead and your mind is still reeling. I wouldn't wish one on my worst enemy. My son won't go to school. He's 16 and bigger and stronger and heavier than me. I've tried everything to get him to go. He's smart and is easily capable of A's and B's, But now he is failing because he can't make up work on days he simply refuses to go. He's seeing a therapist, but I'm at the end of my rope. I can't make him go, and punishing him or taking away privileges hasn't made a difference. Bribes or rewards don't help. I know he cares, but his depression and anxiety take over and he gives up and hides away. I've spent many a morning driving to work sobbing because I know what he is doing to his future, even if he can't or won't see it. I'm helpless and it is killing me inside. The time that took me by greatest surprise and intense pain was when I brought our beloved cat to the vet for what I thought was going to be a routine examination. I couldn't believe my ears when the vet took me into his office after the exam and told me our cat was suffering with a significant tumor and that the most loving thing to do was to put him to sleep. It was a feeling of helplessness and shock as my furry friend of many years was taken away, especially when he looked back at me as the vet assistant carried him down the hallway. P.S. On a happier note, best wishes for a happy cake day, OP. I'm so sorry for your loss. A couple of years ago, I had to put my cat down. He had kidney failure and it seemed like it came out of nowhere and there was nothing that could be done, unless you are rich. I felt so helpless but guilty, like I should have known and done something about it, but I hadn't known he was sick. When a woman came off her bike right in front of me, she didn't take a corner, hit a bridge, catapulted 20 meters and landed on her head. When I reached her side, she was dead. Riding ahead were her husband and daughter. They turned up 20 minutes later, and the police 10 minutes after that. The body was taken by chopper. I was interviewed by the police. There was no fault on me and I was left to go. I had a 5-hour drive home with her death on my mind. I hope you received treatment. That sort of experience will traumatize anyone. When I got raped, suddenly, saying no wasn't enough anymore, and there's nothing I could physically do against this man twice my size. God, this hit me, about no not being enough suddenly. I'm the only girl in my family, 5 brothers, male cousins, and doted on a fair bit because of it. I'd always been able to say no to men and be safe, and then one day I wasn't. It shook me to my core. I'm sorry you had to go through this too. My mom's ex-boyfriend, not my dad, was verbally abusing my mom. Not sure what started it, but he suddenly went off on her. She couldn't drive away with us because we were using his gas. He tried getting me and my brother to go on a walk while they talked, but watching him grab my mom by the jaw and pull her back inside the house while he closed the door on us scared the heck out of me. I screamed and pounded on the door until she opened it. No way in heck I was going to leave her alone. I did end up throwing a rock right by his head to scare him, then screamed to leave us alone. The look of shock on his face was amazing. Eventually we locked ourselves in my brother's room to get away from him. Not too long after that we could hear him sobbing on the other side of the door when he realized what he did. He left us food and drinks by the door and finally left us alone. I like that you included that you also heard him sobbing. That was kind of you. We were in Galway buying tickets for the Aran Island ferry. Cashier tells us they hadn't made the call whether they were running that day or not, as there were strong winds at the moment on the water. We waited a few until they gave the thumbs up and we buy the tickets. We were young, stupid, and missed the hint the universe was trying to give us. The weather didn't seem that bad in Galway city anyway. Now the ferry from mainland island to the Arans is maybe an hour give or take as I recall. For most of the trip you're out of the shelter of the bay and essentially exposed to whatever the North Atlantic wants to throw at you. Well, that day it wasn't strong winds. As we found out, it was hurricane force winds. The ferry spent the hour thrashing this way and that, with extreme rolling along the axis, and we could feel the hull lifting out of the water and smashing back down. The crew was running around closing doors, securing stuff, and handing out bath bags which everyone used liberally. We were being tossed like rag dolls. We had made a horrible mistake. I had my eyes fixed on the rack of life jackets and had mental plan in place to get to it, grab jackets for my wife and I, and then get us out of the cabin before it went under. Because we were going under, and there was abso-freaking-lutely nothing we could do about it. We were at the mercy of the wind, the waves, the captain, the hull, and then, it stopped. We made the islands. We were at the pier, relief finally beating the nausea as we clutched our bags of puke. The kicker is on the return trip a few hours later the sun was out, the breeze was light, and the ride was smooth and easy. I went to Skellig's Michael once and I had a horrible time. And it wasn't even super windy. This girl got me extremely drunk. I was around 17 at the time, and the first time I've really been exposed to alcohol. I was so drunk I was blackout and couldn't move. I kept coming to and from with her on top of me. I tried telling her to get off me, no condom, but she didn't and I was too drunk to get her to move. Eventually I came inside her. She finally got off me. Then I got all of stuff and left. I never really told this story. I'm a big, muscular black man and she was a petite 5'0" woman. Even looking back, I tell myself I should have tried harder to get her off me. But what's done is done. She didn't get pregnant and life moved on. I'm glad you've shared this. I think people need reminding more often than should be required that this can happen to anyone. It just sucks that people do it. Having my internship my senior year of college fall through with only a few weeks to go. If I didn't have one, I couldn't graduate. Luckily through some connections I was able to get another one someplace else. And now I have my degree. It was a very stressful 2 weeks. My dog started drooling and panting heavily while we were laying in bed, so I took him outside. He used the bathroom, circled around to come back inside but was wobbling badly. He got almost to the door and then he just lay down and wouldn't get back up. I tried treats, calling him, nudging him, etc. He's a 155-pound Great Dane so there wasn't exactly a chance for me to just pick him up. When I couldn't get him to get up, I went into full hysterics. My brothers loaded him into the car. I drove as calmly as I could. There was a little speeding. To the emergency vet who I had called and, while still in hysterics, explained that I was on my way with my dog. They busted out the gurney and everything but he just decided he wanted to stand up and walk around all of a sudden. He got stung by a bee and went into anaphylaxis shock. So, yep, you had me in the first half, not gonna lie. I was 17 and had been rescued from a sexually, physically and emotionally abusive gay relationship with a 64-year-old neighbor. It had been going for a little over 4 years and ended when he was arrested for trying to molest another boy. Everyone heard about it and it made my life even worse. The ridicule and bullying I had gotten before they learned about it was even worse. Withdrawn and depressed, I was more than happy when 2 cousins I hadn't seen in 10 years suddenly showed up. They took me under their wings and protected me and I was grateful. Over a week's time we became inseparable. They took me everywhere. One day we went over to their apartment and smoked some weed and then some M. It was all cool and everything. We were having a good time when K, the younger one, suddenly hit me and then grabbed me by the neck. They both punched and kicked me, then forced me to perform oral sex on them before taking turns raping me. This lasted into the next morning when they finally let me go. It was like the previous 4 years all rolled up into one. These were people I trusted and when they turned on me there was nothing I could do but take the beating and comply. Someone I know is in a toxic relationship but won't leave it because she's incredibly in love with the guy and keeps thinking he'll come around. She keeps getting crushed, is in a very unhealthy place emotionally and mentally, and I'm afraid she's ruining her life. This has been going on for 5-6 months now and I've tried every angle to make her see reason but I have no idea what to do anymore. That must suck so much, but I guess the best thing you can do is be there for her and not say I told you so. The first few seconds when I saw my daughter was choking on her food I froze in shock, like is this actually happening or is she pranking me? I went with happening and things were fine after, but man, those first few seconds I was just turned to jelly. A light-hearted story. I am the mother of 4 athletic children, 1 girl and 3 rambunctious boys. I have seen the inside of many rooms with my children due to needing stitches, broken bones, and other injuries. So you would think I knew what to expect and do when one of my children do something stupid and get injured. My youngest son proved how wrong I was, and still is proving it to this day. He was around 6 years old and was playing in his room with crayons, paper, glue, and a small pair of safety scissors. Somehow, he managed to cut off the tip of his index finger. As he is crying and I am holding a towel to his finger, I went through what I should do. Do I take him to the ER for stitches? But there is nothing to stitch. I can't put a bandage on it as it's bleeding too much. Plus, How do you bandage it? Do I look for the tip? I felt so helpless over such a small thing really. In light of other stories, I finally called our doctor's office and thankfully, the doctor had not left his office yet even though it was about 15 minutes past closing. He said to come in, he cleaned the wound, showed me how to bandage something like a fingertip, and sent us home. All is good now. Not that traumatic or big of a deal but definitely one in which I felt completely helpless as a parent. We were out for our usual Boxing Day walk on the Norfolk coast and my dogs were off the lead, walking ahead with the family while my partner and I were behind. One of the dogs fell into some water where a sluice gate was open. Her brother got in after her, then so did I. The gate was obviously open because the current was so strong it sucked her right through. I got out of the water and ran to where the gate must have opened and there she was, soaked through, covered in mud, lifeless. I tried CPR but I don't know if it's different on a dog but nothing worked. I tried for so long to bring her back but nothing worked. Breaks my heart every time I think about her and what happened. We were staying at my parents' cabin and apparently my dad built it really well. It was a chilly night, so we stoked the wood stove and went to sleep. I'm still convinced if our cat hadn't woken us up we would have all died that night. Your cat needs a dang medal. Calculus. Never knew what was going on, and if I forgot one concept I could forget about learning anything else for that semester. During my emergency C-section with my son, the nurses ran in and flipped me over because his heartbeat faded drastically and they were afraid the cord was wrapped around his neck. I was stuck on all fours waiting for the doctor to come in and he looked at me and said they needed to take the baby out quickly. 10 minutes later I was rushed down a hallway to a surgery room. The anesthesiologist came in and had to give me 2 different epidurals because the first one didn't work. Then they completely strapped me down and my arms were strapped like I was on a cross. And then they put a sheet up, so I couldn't see. The sheet fell, just as he was pushing all the way in to pull my son out, and he was elbows deep in me, and I watched him pull out the placenta and my son. Then they laid my son on me, and I was still strapped down, so I couldn't touch him yet. After they sewed and stapled me back up, they parked me in a recovery room to wait for the meds to wear off and I laid there for hours while the feeling slowly came back to my lower half. Thinking that I would not get the ability to walk again, and trying to calm myself down and focus. I got roofied last weekend and boyfriend had to carry my dead weight out of a bar toilet while I vomited blood and repeatedly slammed my head full force into the rim of the toilet. I kept blacking out and couldn't move any of my limbs. And because he looks a little bit janky, bouncers thought he was a dealer who had given me something so they called an ambulance without our permission and cost me a €100 fee. Fortunately his brother was able to come pick me up and convince the paramedics that I really knew them so I didn't have to go to hospital but I was not able to move or talk and vomited for most of the following day. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.